Hello and welcome back to Tales of Lumin. Today we're talking about Hearthstone yet again, and today we are having a look at the results of Blizzard's basic and classic card review. In other words, in layman's terms, nerfs. Today's video is all about the nerfs coming with Whispers of the Old Gods expansion and patch 5.0. It's exciting. As someone that plays more ranked than anything else, as someone that prefers ranked play above the arena and tavern brawl and all that other good stuff, this really does excite me. I've been waiting for this for so long. Again, as I said yesterday, it is as exciting, if not more so, than all the new cards being added, just because some of those cards have been offenders for so long, some of them have been problems for so long, and some of them were changed here. Some were left untouched, but I think that a lot of what we see here will make a lot more sense when the entirety of the Whispers of the Old Gods set has been revealed. So, before we get started on looking at the cards, we're going to start with the Druid cards. I want to just read the guiding principle that Blizzard gave us, that new card releases should have an impact on Standard and Enrich Wild to make sure that Hearthstone is always as dynamic, fresh, and fun as it can be. What can I say? You can't go wrong with that. Now, first up, Druid. I'm not going to read through all the text here. I'm not going to tell you exactly what they say about it. I'm just going to go through it and give you my impressions on some of the changes here. I will, however, link the article below, so if you want to read along or check it out after you've watched this video, you can do so. This is basically just going to be my review of the changes, my thoughts on the changes. First up, Ancient of Lore. It's still 7 mana, 5/5, but now it reads choose one, draw a card, or restore 5 life. So instead of drawing 2 cards, you're now just drawing 1. It's not going to reload the Druid's hand while still giving him that big 5/5 at the same time. It's not as good anymore, but now maybe people will actually use it for the heal more often. It's still a multi-purpose card. I personally think this was a good change because in most cases, you know, you have Druid on the ropes and then suddenly they plonk down this big 5/5 on turn 5 or 7 or whenever, because, you know, Innovate is a thing, or it could even be much earlier than that because Wild Growth is a thing, Darnassus Aspirant's a thing, and then suddenly they've just got a lot of cards again. They just got all the options again. So I think it's a good change that they reduced it to just 1 card over 2, and I do think that this was seen play in pretty much every single Druid deck, and that's one thing that they said here before. Druid was one of the most stale classes in terms of deck building, because there are so many mandatory cards in the Druid set that you just gotta have in those decks. They're mandatory. They're too good not to include. So a lot of the decks that people built ended up being almost identical, and they had like 1 or 2 card differences. I like the change. I'm a big fan. Then, probably one of the larger changes here, Force of Nature. It now costs 5 mana, and it merely summons 3 2/2 treants. That's it. It is basically a Silverhand Knight now. That's the name of the card, right? Silverhand Knight, 5 mana for a 4/4 that summons a 2/2 Squire. Because that's the same amount of stats for the same cost, except this is a spell. So I understand completely why they changed this and why they didn't change Savage Roar, because charge. There's always going to be an issue with charge, and you can see that that's a general theme in some of the changes Blizzard have been making over the past couple of years even, that they don't like charge that much. It limits them from a design perspective. Because then you get things eventually happening like what happened with the Grim Patron decks and the Frothing Berserker, Warsong Commander. I mean, this nerf is not as extreme as the Warsong Commander nerf, because I feel like this could still see some play. It's not horrible, it's okay, but it is nowhere near as powerful as it was, and you are not going to be one-shotting your opponent with Force of Nature Savage Roar, or Force of Nature Savage Roar Savage Roar. Savage Roar is still there, and you can still play the 2/2 treants, and then the next turn Savage Roar and attack, and that's still cool, it still works, but you're not going to be fearing for your life when you're playing against a Druid and you're sitting on anything below 15 hit points. So I think this is a much needed change, and I'm actually happy with it. I think it's pretty cool. I like that they didn't touch Savage Roar, because it means that now we might see more creative and different Druid decks pop up that try and leverage things like tokens. You know, lots of smaller dudes to boost up with Savage Roar, or double Savage Roar, Power of the Wild, stuff like that. I think that kind of deck will probably see more play now, and that's good. That's a good thing. So that's changed. And next up for Druid, again, this is the final Druid card that was changed, Keeper of the Grove. I guess arguably this could be the biggest change. Because this guy, he's just been the same all these years, and he's been useful all these years. He has been such a great anti-aggro tool, such a great late game tool. Keeper of the Grove still costs 4 mana, but instead of being a 2/4, he's now a 2/2. The reason for this change, if I'm not mistaken, is to make him more just that utility minion instead of the massive tempo swing as well as the utility. I mean, the multi-choice that he has, the deal 2 damage or silence a minion, is already so good. So him being a 4 mana 2/2 now means that you'll have to think a little more before playing him. Think a little more whether that's the target you actually want to use it on. It'll be more a speciality card as well that might only make its way into certain decks, I suppose. And I think that Blizzard are trying to, based on the next couple of changes you're going to see, also wane down the amount of silence and removal in the game that's like readily available to everyone, or maybe just to certain classes that's much more powerful than other silence and removal in the game. I like the fact that I think that the card is still viable. I honestly think it's still 100% viable because it's such a great effect. You can still, technically, with this card, take down a 4 hit point minion. You know, you can still use it on turn 4, or if you innovate it out or whatever, do 2 damage and then kill it. You can still silence with it. It's still got all utility, it's just not got the bulk attached to it. I don't think that it's too major. I mean, people will see that as one of the bigger changes, but this dude still, I think he'll still be included in many, many Druid decks. Maybe he'll just be a 1-of now, instead of a 2-of, because of the fact that the body is smaller now, but yeah, I think it's okay. Next up, Ironbeak Owl. He's been finding his way into pretty much every single aggro deck in existence for the past 2 years, because he's just such a good way, an inexpensive and efficient way to remove taunt and give you something on the board, something that can't just be ignored. So the change that they made to the Ironbeak Owl is that he now costs 3 mana instead of 2. The body is the same, still 2/1. Battlecry is the same, still silences. But I think that this once again just means that people have to think a little harder about just tossing a silence into their deck. It's got to be a real consideration. So now I think with this change going live, with it costing 3 mana for a 2/1 body, people might actually play Spellbreaker. Sure, you see Spellbreaker here and there, maybe in some of the Reno decks, but you might see it much more often, because that's 4 mana for a 4/3 that has the same Battlecry. Sure, it's not a beast, but it's still a bigger body, and it's only 1 mana more. But that does mean that you can silence 1 turn later. Like, it costs that 1 mana more, so you might not be able to squeeze the silence in just anywhere. I like this change. I like the fact that this, along with the next one, which I'm about to talk about, helps, again, just encourage more creative deck building, and it allows people to play stuff without this constant fear. Speaking of constant fear, the next card that was nerfed, he is pretty much the embodiment of constant fear. Big Game Hunter. Until this point, until this goes live, you just can't play anything with more than 7 attack, because everyone's always got that Big Game Hunter in their deck. For 3 mana, you get a 4/2, and you just deck that minion. All the dragons that have more than 8 attack, rendered useless by this little guy. So yeah, they had to change it. Of course they had to change it. We knew they were going to change this. Now Big Game Hunter costs 5, up from 3. Do I think this will still see play? Yes, absolutely. I think so. Maybe still just 1-of in certain decks, but it was way too cheap for way too big a body and way too good an effect. And now, well, now we can all breathe easier when we make it our Old Gods decks, because the Old Gods are safe from his wrath. Well, at least partly, because I do think people will still play him, like I said, and there'll be other forms of removal, sure, but with Blizzard cutting down on at least a little bit of the silence and big game removal, I think it's just going to be so much more fun building a deck that might actually work, because the tempo swing from that, like, someone gets to turn 7, finally I made it to turn 7, okay, I've got this Dr. Boom here, let's play it, and then you pass over to your opponent's turn for just 3 mana. He removes that. He removes all of it. Sure, there are the boombots left, but who even cares? That big 7/7 that you played, that monster of a minion is gone. Even worse when you play something like, I don't know, Nefarian, Onyxia. I don't want to bring up Alexstrasza. I actually thought Alexstrasza might be changed. Gruul. Oh, maybe this is the age of Gruul. Guys, maybe Gruul will finally be viable. You know what I'm saying, though, right? You understand what I'm saying? This one, the big game hunter, really needed to be changed. So now, again, you got to think a lot harder before you put this in your deck, because it won't just be that auto-include. It's not just a 3 mana 4/2 anymore. For 5 mana, a 4/2, you know, the stats are not great. You're paying a lot for those stats. Now you're actually paying a decent amount to kill that minion with an attack of 7 or more. Good change. Really, really good change. Next up's Hunter's Mark. Again, removal being changed. That's the theme here. It's basically just up to 1 mana from 0. I'm not certain, but wasn't Hunter's Mark at some point during the beta or something on 1 mana? I don't know if it's always been 0. I can't remember. That was a long time ago. But this change just makes sense. It was way too efficient at 0 mana, and it is still, at 1 mana, one of the best forms of removal. I mean, if you think about it, Paladins have a 1 mana spell called Humility that sets a minion's attack to 1. This is just way better. Why would you set something's attack to 1 if you can set something's health to 1? Still really good. Even at 1 mana, I like it. Maybe they add in something to make lock and load better, more viable or whatever. So they had to quickly change this so it's not crazy efficient. I don't know. Next up, Blade Flurry. This came kind of out of nowhere. I don't think Blade Flurry was really on anyone's radar, but that's probably just because Rogue wasn't really on anyone's radar. Rogue is not in a great place. Rogue is going to be in a worse place if they don't add a lot of good stuff for the class. But we don't know what they're adding yet, so maybe, and most likely, this was made in preparation for some good stuff coming with Whispers of the Old Gods and in future sets. But Blade Flurry now costs 4 mana up from 2, and it now also only deals damage to minions instead of to minions and your enemy hero. So now you got to make a choice whether you want to clear the board or deal damage to your opponent directly. You can't do both in one fell swoop. I think that this is also going to allow Blizzard to do more fun stuff with weapons for Rogue, just because the last couple of expansions and adventures that came out haven't really done very much for Rogue. I mean, the best weapon we got was Poisoned Blade, which was a disaster. Honestly, that is probably the worst card that Rogue has at the moment. And maybe it'll see play at some point. Maybe Inspire Rogue will make sense at some point. But this change needed to be made for sure so that Blizzard could go ahead and add better weapons, different tools to Rogue that wouldn't clash, and make Rogue even better at just one-shotting things. Because that's how Rogue played. Bursty. It's always been like that. Or it's been like that since Oil Rogue came to prominence. Became the only viable, proper, viable Rogue deck. And it's been a while since Miracle. I don't think Malagos Rogue is as stable as Oil Rogue at this point. But if this didn't happen, well, then everyone would probably just have stuck with Oil Rogue. Because a lot of those cards are also still going to be around. And if Blizzard want to add more stuff to boost the weapon power of Rogue, then Blade Flurry would always have been a problem. So it makes perfect sense to me that they changed it, and I think that the massive cost increase, they doubled the cost, is probably just because of prep. A lot of stuff will probably just be because of prep. That's what it's going to come down to. Now, powerful neutral minions. I mean, I actually kind of see the Big Game Hunter and Ironbeak Owl as powerful neutral minions, but hey, There are some more powerful neutral minions, one of them being Knife Juggler. Knife Juggler was changed, not too drastically, it's still 2 mana, but instead of being a 3-2, it's now a 2-2. Same effect. I think this is the one change that most people were not super happy with, because most people wanted the effect to be removed. They wanted the knife toss-in of the Knife Juggler to be changed or modified in some way to make it less, well, devastating. I don't know. But he's now a 2-2, so he can't kill 3 hit point dudes like instantly, but the effect remains. So, well, I guess he can if he hits those juggles. I mean, you put in the Knife Juggler in there for his effect, not specifically for the 3 attack. The 3 attack was a nice bonus, but the effect is what you're mainly after. He's still got 2 health, he can still die pretty easily. Now he just can't trade up as efficiently, so I think it's cool. I think it's really cool. And then we have the changes to Gnome. This guy was also an auto-include in pretty much every single aggro deck out there, and even in the changed state, I think he's still going to see play quite a lot. They basically changed him to a 1-1 from a 2-1. Still 1 mana, still deals 2 damage to the enemy hero when he dies. Instead of being a 2-1, he's a 1-1, which means your 2 hit point minions are now safe. At least from the aggro decks that play these. Because these guys were super annoying. I didn't like them. I really, really didn't like them. They, more often than not, guaranteed 4 damage to the enemy hero's face for just 1 mana. Now, maybe it'll just be 3 damage, and that's already a little bit better. Okay? A little bit better. Then we have Arcane Golem. Mangled. He's actually no good anymore. I don't think that anyone's going to play Arcane Golem ever again. It used to be 3 mana for a 4-2 with charge, battlecry, give your opponent a mana crystal. Now it's 3 mana for a 4-4, battlecry, give your opponent a mana crystal. Charge is gone. I don't see why you'd play this. But hey, I mean, maybe if you go in for a deck that has high value minions with super negative downsides, then you could put this guy in there. Did people play Dancing Swords? I don't think so. This is as bad. Sure, in the late game, 3 mana for a 4-4 is actually not horrible, but you actually want to play this on turn 2 or turn 3, because that just makes much more sense. Next up, Molten Giant. They changed its cost from 20 to 25. That's it. Now you need to be on 5 hit points to play this dude for free. I think that is a very good change. I think it's a much needed nerf to this card, and I suppose again some of this might be in response to some stuff that's come in with Whispers of the Old Gods or in the future, but I think a lot of it is just because it's now not as risky going down to 5 life or under 10 life anymore, because a lot of the charge minions have been nerfed or changed or whatever, so you can feel a little safer playing it, or a little safer dropping down to 5. But man, in its previous form, it was so frustrating playing against something like a handlock, where whenever you get anywhere near 10 health, then you start fearing for your life, even though the handlock is nearly dead. Because then, at any point, bam, he could just play Molten Giant for free, Defender of August between them, and then you just boned. Unless you saved up removal that's going to have to be pretty significant from earlier just for that. It was a little too much. So I'm happy with the change. I think that's a good one. Next up, and finally, Master of Disguise. So this lady never really saw play. I feel like most people won't even recognize this card, but it was changed to give stealth only until your next turn instead of permanently, and that just straight up makes sense. I understand that completely. It does limit them greatly in terms of what they can do with cards going forward. Being able to give something stealth permanently is not good. That's not great, because there's only one class that can remove stealth. I don't know if Master Spell removes stealth, but obviously Flare removes stealth, and that's that. So, you know, you could say there could be more interactions like the whole Master of Disguise Mal'Ganis thing in the future, where you can stealth Mal'Ganis and then you just immune forever. Maybe Blizzard have cards sort of like that coming up that they don't want abused. But that's it. I'm done. So there were a few cards that were untouched, left unnerfed, that I think some people are still worrying about a little bit. I personally think it's okay. Really, I think that the changes that they made should be enough, and if any of the other cards are problems, they may only be problems now. If you think about it, when Whispers of the Old Gods releases, there are going to be so many new cards, so many new interactions, so many different ways to use old cards that I think that things that were maybe completely imbalanced might not be anymore. Things that you felt were completely broken might be just, okay. Now, I have read a little bit about people worrying about the strength of Freeze Mage and Aggro Shaman going into Standard Mode and Whispers of the Old Gods because they were pretty much left untouched. Freeze Mage is losing basically nothing. Basically nothing. I think Aggro Shaman is only losing Crackle, but it still has a lot of other great removal options. Crackle's a big deal, but it's not a big enough deal to make the deck completely unviable. It's still going to work really well. Those are the two problem decks that people are talking about right now, but who even knows if that's going to be a thing. Maybe, again, like I said, maybe Whispers of the Old Gods will make a big enough difference to the meta that those decks will again just sort of slot in somewhere in the midfield. They won't be dominatingly powerful, but some people also said with the removal of Naxxramas, we lose in, and GVG of course, we lose in Antique Healbot and Sludge Belcher. That's going to make dealing with stuff like Aggro Shaman much harder. I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts about it, just because everyone thinks differently about these things. Everyone plays different classes. Everyone has different favorites. So which of these are you upset about? Which of these are you most happy about? I personally think they were all actually pretty good. I'm a little concerned about Rogue, but I'm gonna have faith in Blizzard, and I think that I will go ahead thinking that things are gonna be okay. Because it's been a while since Rogue's been on top, since Rogue has had something really good in their arsenal, but we'll see. Okay, we'll see. Overall, I'm happy with the changes, and I'm just super excited now to see all the Whispers of the Old Gods cards. By the time this video goes up, the live stream should probably have already happened, so you guys would already have seen the show matches and stuff, some of the new cards in action, the game board. So if you want, you can also let me know what you think of those. The chances are, however, I'll probably be talking about that tomorrow. So you can also just save it for that. But man, I'm keen. I'm keen for these changes, and I'm keen for Standard and Wild Mode, and obviously also super, super keen for all those new cards in Whispers of the Old Gods. But you can check back here soon for more. Give this a like, share it, and do all that good stuff. Most importantly though, happy basic and classic card review. Happy that.